Hello and welcome to the Deception Tips podcast, where you will learn amazing cues to detect deceit that will help you read people like never before. I'm your host, Spencer Kaufman. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to Deception Tip episode number 72. We are making progress. I really encourage you to leave a review for this podcast. It would really help me out. I would like you to go on iTunes and find this podcast, leave a review on there, and put in your comments so that other people can find this review. Go on iHeartRadio, leave a review there as well. Anywhere else, go on Google Play and leave a review there. Those are the three main areas, and if you're listening on a different platform, I really would appreciate it if you'd leave a review on those three, plus whatever other platform you are listening on. In addition, if you could subscribe to the Body Language YouTube channel, where these Deception Tips videos are, that would also really help me out. Occasionally drop a comment on there. That would be great. Like a video or something like that. Share it. That would all be over the top. But if you could write a review for this podcast and you could subscribe to that Body Language channel, that would be tremendous. And in fact, if you do that, contact me in some way. I want to hear from you. So go ahead, write a review, subscribe to the channel, contact me, and I'll give you a reward. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you so much for your support, for continuing to listen. As I've said before, I do this all in my free time. It's a lot of early mornings and late nights, getting it in when I can. But your support really means a lot to me. So thank you again. Now, last time we talked about a deception tip called palms up, whereas when liars are lying or they're accused of something, they may turn their palms up. As we stated, it was a pre-shrug gesture. So this is something that a liar will do kind of when they're saying, I don't know. It's right before that. They're going to turn their palms up, continuing on with the gesture, or turning it into a cluster would be that shrugging of the shoulders. They may even step back or complete the whole thing, and from the palms up, they'll raise their hands, kind of like a hands up or stick 'em up cowboy situation, or police having a gun pointing on you and you put your hands up, that kind of a thing. It rolls into a complete cluster or pattern of behaviors there. What does it mean? Well, typically you'll see it again when accusing a liar or when questioning them about something in their story, when you are putting a direct contradiction against whatever they're saying. It's when you have doubt. It's when you're not believing them and when they know you're not believing them. They may say, well, I don't know, or they may shrug something like, well, that's what I said, and kind of turning it back on you like, hey, I'm sticking with my story, and they'll turn their palms up. They may or may not shrug the shoulders. It depends on how in-depth they get. If you start pushing them and they don't know, then you might see those shoulders shrug. If they make a statement, keep in mind, you might see a slight shoulder shrug if they don't believe that statement, because maybe they are trying to back up something and they're making a statement. They shrug with one shoulder to push it out. That means they have no confidence in what they're saying. We talked about that in episode number 48. Keep all of that in mind. Remember to review the videos, review the tips. I encourage you to listen to last week's episode if you didn't, but chances are you did. So if you did, go ahead and review the other episodes mentioned and keep in mind with those other tips as well, because they all fit together. We're making patterns, we're making clusters of behavior so that you will know when someone is lying to you, so you will not be taken advantage of by their lies, because people lie all the time. Whether or not they mean to, or whether or not they are malicious or trying to take advantage of you, is to be determined. But bottom line, people lie all the time. This week, we are talking about another deception tip. This one is more general. It is more related to the entire body. And it is very basic. So it's something that you will be able to see right away no matter what. And it is something that people do. They do all of these behaviors, but this one, this is like, they do it. Like, you can see this. People can't even help it. And even if they know they're doing it, they still do it. Or like if they're conscious of it, it still happens. This one is very obvious and it's very apparent. And it has to do with people pointing in certain directions or leaning in certain directions based on what they want. Now, we've talked about similar tips before, but they were more tips of certain areas of the body. We talked about it like with their legs or with where their shoulders or their torso might be, etc. So we're going to dive into this tip. Here it is, deception tip number 72. Be mindful of a person's bodily axis. The direction in which they tilt can tell you how open they are to the current situation. Here it is again, deception tip number 72. Be mindful of a person's bodily axis. The direction in which they tilt can tell you how open they are to the current situation. Now, what does this mean? Well, when people lean certain directions, they're obviously either more interested in that thing or they want to go in that direction. We've mentioned this before, as I've stated, with different things on how people want to be kind of pointing towards exits or whether their torso is engaged in the conversation. We talked a little bit about a general thing on when you have two people in a conversation, if they're facing each other, the conversation it appears to be closed. Whereas if they're more open, then they could invite like a third person in there because they're open in that conversation where they may be inviting people into that conversation. They're not necessarily openly inviting someone by saying, hey, come on in, you can be a part of this conversation. What they're doing is their body language says it's not a private conversation or it's not a closed conversation. We also had how people's feet, like they could be sitting and they could be pointed in a certain direction, like towards the exit if they want to get away. They may point their whole body. They may open up their legs to it. We talked a lot about this in episode 50, and that was towards the exit. So I encourage you to check out that episode if you want a little bit of a refresher. But I kind of just gave you the refresher on a lot of it, so that's pretty much it. Keep that in mind, though. When people are pointed in certain directions, that may be where they want to go. It also may be they're more interested in that conversation or in that situation. So a bodily axis would be their entire body. We talked again, like I said, about basically towards the exit was their entire body. But I know over the course of all of these episodes, I've mentioned how people's frame, so like maybe their legs are engaged in a conversation, as in they're squared up with the conversation, but their torso may be pointed towards the exit or somewhere else they want to leave. Or maybe it's the opposite. Their shoulders are squared up with the conversation, but their legs, as in their knees or wherever, they're opened up towards the exit they want to go. That is pointing or leaning. That's a bodily axis. This one is more of their entire body. It's a leaning. They're leaning in, they're leaning away, forward, backward, towards the exit, away from the exit, towards the conversation, away from the conversation. We're going to talk a lot more about it coming up right after this.
Want to be a human lie detector, but don't have the brains or the guts to do it? We understand. That's why we created the Deception Tips blog, especially for you. Check it out today on SpencerKaufman.com.
Welcome back to Deception Tip episode number 72, where we are talking about the orientation of a bodily axis. Now, what does that mean? That's a lot of big words. Orientation, bodily axis, you know what those are. But we're going to break them down anyway to give you a little bit better understanding and maybe a perspective you haven't heard before. So the orientation of the body is basically wherever someone is orientated, that's where they want to be. That's where they're going. That's what they have in mind. So if you are having a conversation with three other people, or there are three people in the conversation, you are a part of a group. When you're talking to them, let's say you guys are all standing, you're in a little circle, you're in a huddle. What happens if, like on the football team, for example, the cheerleaders walk by? Pretty soon you see a few of the football players start to kind of drift from that conversation. Their eyes are looking over at the cheerleaders. Their kind of heads are maybe turning. Maybe even their shoulders are turning. They've left that conversation. Their bodily axis is pointed towards those cheerleaders. They want to be in the conversation with the cheerleaders. They've left that conversation. Now, they haven't really left it, but their mind is elsewhere. They have gone. They've moved on. That huddle has boring them. It's done. It's over with. The same is true anywhere else in life. if there's a business negotiation, if there's a meeting at a coffee shop, if there's anything, it's in a boardroom, the second you see someone's bodily orientation, whether it's their shoulders start to turn, their head goes a different direction, their feet and legs are pointed towards the exit, they want to get out of there, something like that. If you see that happening, you've lost that person. You need to either get them back or dismiss them because something is not right in that conversation. You're saying something that they don't want to hear anymore. They've given you a chance already, and they've ran out of patience. Now they're done. They're ready to leave. They don't want to hear another tactic or a different way of presenting. They're over it. You've lost them. You can get them back, however, but you need to specifically re-engage that person. You just talk to them, ask them for their thoughts, their opinions. Be ready for a brutally honest and rude answer because you've already lost them. They are going to now give you the truth, you hope, so that you can address their concern, change, and then come back. So you cannot be prideful and arrogant if you see that you've lost someone. You need to redirect and change your thoughts and be open to whatever they consider. So keep that in mind. A person's bodily access. Now this is also something that would go with whatever is happening around them. It doesn't need to be some kind of important meeting. If someone is watching a movie and they really like the movie, they're going to be leaned in, they're going to be focused on the TV screen. Whereas if it's a movie that they don't really care about, they may not like it. When I was in college, I had a friend, and you guys have heard stories about him before. He's an awesome person, the best guy currently in Canada, and he was great. He moved to Canada. I went and visited him one time. Now, those of you that know me, you're going to know who this is, but it doesn't matter. He was sleeping one time on the couch. I was watching a movie, and he wakes up. He says, "Oh, man, check your position." And I said, "What?" And I was focused into this movie, so I was kind of annoyed that he bothered me. He said, "Oh, that movie is good like that? Look at this." And I realized that he enacted my position. I was feet flat on the floor. I was leaning forward. My elbows were on my knees, and my hand was under my chin, and my chin was resting in my hand, and I was just focused. I was zoned into this movie. Now, the movie was Olympus Has Fallen. It's a great movie. But I was totally focused on this movie. I was leaning in. My bodily axis was pointed towards the screen on my laptop, and I was engaged in that film. I was a part of it. And he made that statement. Another time, this was years prior to when I was in Canada with him, he came over one time and said, "Oh, man, I know you don't like that movie." I said, "Why? What's up?" He said, "Because like that you lean back and you don't even pause when you leave." And I said, "Yeah. It's not that good of a movie." People's bodily orientation and their bodily access can tell you a lot about whether or not they want to be involved in something or whether or not they want to participate, whether they're over it or whether they like it. When someone is leaning in being towards whatever they are engaging with. So if you're in a conversation, let's say you're on a date, and the girl is sitting across from you at the table, and she's kind of leaning back, twirling her hair, looking around, chewing gum, it's done, man. You're over. You have no chance. You could get a chance later, but that night, no. You need to regroup and call her up for a second date or something because that one is over. And on the other hand, if you're talking and she's leaning in and she's got her elbow on the table and her hand resting underneath her chin and she's even putting some weight on her hand, maybe the palm is open and it's on her cheek and her head is tilted, that's good. Now she's into it. She's listening. She wants to hear what you're saying. She's involved. She's engaged with that conversation. She wants to learn more. Now, girls, same thing. If a guy is kind of out there wandering around with his body language, is not looking at you, he's looking around the room, it's done. It's over. On the other hand, if he's sitting there and he looks like he's pondering something or he's got his leg crossed in the figure 4 position, now you know you've got him. The deal's ready to be made. He's interested. So keep in mind the bodily orientation, the axis, because wherever a person's body is leaning or pointing, that is what they are interested in or engaged with. So I want to thank you for listening to the Deception Tips podcast. I hope that you'll share it with your friends, subscribe to the feed, check out the videos, the blog, and take a look at the books I have available. And as always, tune in next week for a new Deception Tip.